Hello and thanks for coming to check this out. Right, let's start by explaining a basic fact about animating in motion, and that is that you cannot publish keyframes through to Final Cut. So I have a simple demonstration here. Okay, it's just a shape animated by keyframes over the x-axis. And you can see I have the speed curve here in the editor. Okay, so if you want to give the user of the Final Cut template the ability to adjust this final X value to allow it to go further or not so far, you might think that you can publish the parameter here, which I've done. Okay, but the fact is that it's not going to work in Final Cut because Final Cut just will not accept the keyframes on the parameter. If you're not sure what I mean, put this together yourself, publish it as a Final Cut title or effect or generator, then open it up in Final Cut, and what you'll see is the shape sitting still and nothing happening with the parameters at all. Okay, so the general solution is to use a behavior to animate with instead, to push something from one point to another. But the only behavior really available to us is the ramp behavior, as far as I know, or there is the exponential and logarithmic, but they're not really suited to this, and if they are, I've checked it out, using them makes things very complex with the rigging involved. Okay, so to explain a bit more, let's have a look at using the ramp behavior. Okay, so what I've done here is I've added another shape and I have added the ramp behavior to it. The ramp behavior runs the entire duration and I have the end offset to finish after 30 frames. The project is 30 frames a second, so 30 frames 1 second. And I have the start value and the end value of the ramp matching the start and end values for the keyframe shape. But what you can see is that the curve, the speed of the ramp is less interesting. So what we have available to us is the curvature feature here, which gives you kind of an ease in, ease out animation, but that's all you have access to. It is riggable, so you could try and work something out by adding it to a slider, but still you're confined to this. I don't think that rigging it is going to give you any better function than this, and if it is, that's outside of my knowledge. Okay, so the benefit of using the ramp behavior and thinking about the automated titles that we've done, I say many times that don't keyframe your titles, do it through a sequence text instead, because then you get publishable parameters. So we're not using text here, we're using ramp, but it is a behavior. So I can publish this parameter, which I've done. And now we'll go and have a look in Final Cut to see how they compare. Okay, so I've published the template and we're looking at it now in Final Cut, and if I play it, you'll see the ramped shape is moving, but here's that shape that we keyframed, it's doing nothing. And if, by the way, the keyframes, here's the keyframe parameter, the keyframes are active as far as I know, so if I make an adjustment at one point and another adjustment at this point, what I have done is I've set keyframes. So that's the result when you try and publish keyframes through to Final Cut, right? It doesn't work. But here's the ramped object and we published this value, and note that this does work. Let's push it out further. Okay, so you see that using the ramp behavior, if you want to give control over locations, X and Y or Z, whatever you're ramping, you can have a parameter to publish to give the user of your template some control. But as we saw before, you have almost no options to provide an interesting speed for the animation, and we're going to go and look at the solution to that now. Okay, so back to motion, and what you can see here is I've added a sequence text to a single character, one glyph, and the sequence text is set to move to the same position as the square, and I have it offset, the end offset set so that it finishes at 1 second. We've covered this before, I'll just quickly point it out again. So this sequence text behavior runs the duration of the project, which is 10 seconds at 30 frames a second. So the sequence text is 300 frames long. So if I want it to stop after 1 second, I've got to pull back the end condition by 270 frames. So it just has 30 frames to run. Right, so this glyph here is running along the x-axis driven by the sequence text. So we're using a sequence text, so we have all of the speed options available to us now. So straight away we have more benefit than using the ramp behavior. Ease in, ease out, decelerate, and the best thing is that we can set it to custom, and as we've seen before, if you want to keyframe your text elements, don't keyframe them directly. Come into the set up a sequence text, and you can keyframe directly through the sequence text instead. So what we're doing now is keyframing regularly, normally, but we're doing it through the sequence text. So I can set my curve to whatever I want, something more interesting than these presets allow. Whoops. Okay, for example. And because we're using a behavior, this value is publishable just the same way that we saw with the ramp behavior. So here's what we're going to do. We want to transfer the qualities of the sequence text behavior to this shape so that we can animate a shape with a custom curve, or at the least better options available that are available for the ramp, but also we're going to get all the benefits of the duration controls as well. So let's have a look at how we do that. Right, I've made a few changes here. You'll see that I've renamed the sequence text group as the null driver. It's just my word for it. And I've renamed the shape as shape linked to null sequence, so you can see what's happening. And I have a link on the shape. I took off the ramp behavior. So what I've done is I've gone to the X position for the shape. I've added a link, and as the source I've added the glyph, and I haven't set that to the X position. That won't work. If I do that, you'll see nothing happens. The shape stays still. I've set it to the edge. You can use any edge you want. If we're going across X though, you'll want to use left or right. And now we are transferring the qualities of the sequence text to this shape. And you might be thinking you could try and do this with a replicator with a single cell. I've tried it out. Doesn't work. The sequence replicator does not have all of the nice options that sequence text has. Anyway, so now we are driving the animation of the shape through a sequence text through this link. So we have all of these options available to us. We have more speed presets and you could publish those, but better yet, we have the custom speed option. So I'm going to choose that. Oh, hey, by the way, let's go back. Let me just point something out. We've covered this before, but I'll bring it up again for the beginners out there. So I have a sequence text behavior applied, and you see it's running all the way across my project. My project is 30 frames a second and 10 seconds, so this duration is 300 frames. I want it to stop after 1 second, so I have the edge offset, the end offset here set to 270, so it only has 30 frames to run. This is important because I have the sequencing set to 2. So if you're thinking, why don't you just trim it out to 1 second, I'll show you what happens. Let's trim this behavior to 1 second, and what you'll see is, I have to reset the end offset here. Okay, so what you're going to see is it's going to work, but then it's going to snap back. So in this situation, we want to set it to the full duration and use the end offset instead, so it doesn't snap back. Okay, so we covered that. Let's continue looking at what we can do. Okay, so we have these speed options now. Immediate benefit over using the ramp behavior, and what we're actually doing here is we are just ramping from point A to point B, but we're doing it through the sequence text, which gives us a lot more options than the ramp as we saw before. So we have these speed options. You can publish these to give to the user of your template, but better yet, we have got the end offset that we can use. We can publish it, and this can become a duration control. So we've covered this before in the, well, actually, I think I just covered it in the previous post about putting overshoot on sequence text. If you want to know about rigging it to a slider, go and check that out. But what we're going to do now is just publish it. We'll publish duration and end offset, which we're going to call duration, and just the same with the ramp behavior, we can publish this final value too. And as you saw before, this is going to work in Final Cut. So where's my published parameters? Here we are. Okay, so let's push this. Put the out position further up. Okay, so with the end offset parameter, if I rename this as duration, if I lower that, and then it's going to run for a longer time. Okay, go and check out the overshoot on text post if you want to see how to make this more intuitive to use, because what we're doing here is we're making a shorter value to make it run for a longer time. So what you want to do is add that to a slider rig and customize that so that you have lower value is lower time and higher value is higher time. Anyway, I'm just going to reset that to how we had it, and we'll come back to the sequence text. Just bring my play range out back in, and we're going to look at this wonderful feature. We are using sequence text, so now we have the custom speed available. And if you have been following along with any of the automated titles, you'll know that if you want to animate your text by keyframes, don't do it directly, run it all through a sequence text, because then you have these values publishable. And as we saw before, if you try and publish keyframes directly to Final Cut, it just falls apart. So I've set it to custom speed now. So I'm going to select that set a keyframe there, come to 1 second where I want it to be, and set a keyframe to 100. So you see we have this curve. Actually, because I played around with it, that curve should already be there for you, but I had to reset things. Alright, so set to custom speed, click on it, you should see your curve straight away, and if you don't, just do what I did there, set keyframes on it. Okay, so with the custom speed now, we can set our own speed curve to give us more options than these presets, if that is what you want to do. So let's just turn off the null driver, so now we're just looking at the shape. Let's push it out further again and come back and change this duration. Okay, that's about it. I'll leave you with that. Thanks for checking it out and thanks for watching.